Hey guys, it's Logan here with Hydra572. Let me say right off the bat that if your YouTube viewing habits are anything like mine, this review might seem a little bit contradictory to you. You see, when I watch knife reviews on YouTube, I like to really get a sense for the reviewer that I'm watching. When I'm bored, I'll sit down and watch 15, 20 videos on knives that I'm not even really interested in purchasing, just so that I can get a really good feel for the specific tastes of the person that is reviewing the blades. So I know, for example, that Cynric likes his knives to have sort of weird and cool grinds. He really likes his Tontos. He likes bizarre stuff. I know that Bikes and Blades prefers cheaper knives because he thinks that they provide the best value, and he's got a pretty cool analytical approach. And of course we all know that Nut and Fancy loves to harp on lightness and jimping. So if you're watching this review, and if you really have all of my tastes memorized, it might seem weird to you that this is one of my favorite knives ever, and one of my best EDC options that's been in my rotation for a long time and hasn't left since it got in. You might be looking at this going, Logan, we know you like the different color options for handles, but you don't like to buy anything that's the mini version of anything. And you've said before that you would prefer a full or a partial flat grind on an EDC blade. Something this small doesn't really seem to match your tastes. And you've said before that with a Wharncliffe blade, you tend to have to be sharpening the tip a lot. They tend not to make the best EDC cutters. And you're right about all that, but the thing about this blade, and I've talked about this a little before, is this review isn't just going to be a sum of all these different things on the review sheet. This isn't going to be a sum of the parts review the same way that it might be for something like, I don't know, the Mantis Pit Boss. It's another blade that's on my queue right now. This review is going to be about something that I'm pretty passionate about, that I've shopped this market quite a bit because of this blade. I've shopped other competitive options, and this just really seems to be the best option. I'm passionate about this blade. I really, really like it. And so I'll go through the review sheet, but this review is going to be much more about me sharing my passion for this blade, the same way that the Espada review was that way. And so we'll go ahead and get started with its intended usage. I basically already gave it away. This is an EDC utility cutter. I would like to have this knife in my hand if I absolutely had to get into a fist fight that I felt like I was going to lose. I would use it to defend myself, but it's not my chosen knife for defense, and I think you guys can see why. It is pretty small. The pricing, it is $26.50 on Blade HQ. You can get it a little bit cheaper if you shop around eBay, Amazon, and all that. The blade profile, as you guys can see, is that sort of curving Wharncliffe kind of design. I realize that's contradictory. I mean that it's curved in this dimension and then that the cutting edge is Wharncliffe style. It is a very correctly angled tip. That means that the way the knife sits in your hand, you can get the tip involved in a cut pretty easily. Some Wharncliffes do have a problem with that. If you curve it off too much and you can't use the tip for cutting, it really cripples a design like this. But the tip is acute and it's correctly angled and you can use it. Belly, you don't have any. It's a Wharncliffe, so there's going to be no curved portion. The steel is Cold Steel's AUS 8A. The retention is good, and sharpening, I've found, has been great, and I put an if there on the review sheet. And the if is, when you get the factory edge, the first couple of times that you re-hone or steel, strop, however you want to describe, those sharpenings where you're not taking a whole lot of steel off the blade. The first 5 or even 6 times that you do that, Cold Steel's factory edge on their AUS 8 does great. After that, I've found that it's better to just go ahead and reprofile the entire edge. I've found that on a number of Cold Steels. This one happens to still be in those first couple of honings. I've tested it, but not really rigorously. I wasn't going to go out and abuse it after I figured out that I liked its cutting performance and that sharpening it was easy enough. The grind, as already discussed, is a partial hollow grind, which I've found to be just fine. It's got the flat, so for a consistent angle sharpener you can clamp it in and go to work. And it's hollow. It's not really hollow enough that it's going to make a difference for slicing. It's just a good all-around, basically very similar to a flat grind type of design. For deployment, we have the thumb hole, so we can use it just like that as a thumb stud, and we can do our Spidey drops, which Logan can't do from behind the camera because he's klutzy, but that would be grabbing it like this, dropping it down like that to open it just like you would a Spyderco with a thumb opening hole. And that's really it. Try as I might, I can't get a rotational inertial type opening, and there's no flipper, so we're basically stuck with just those two. The lock is a triad lock. which I've said before is the strongest locking mechanism, and I'll stand by that, but this one isn't like the others. The others have a leaf spring pushing against the lock bar. I discussed that in my How Lockbacks, and specifically how the Triad lock works video. This has a coil spring. It's seated in the plastic. There's a little shelf for it to sit on underneath the lock bar, and then it pushes up on the lock bar from underneath. It's a coil spring, which I thought was cool and innovative. I'm not sure if it was completely necessary, but it works pretty well. This Triad, though, the handle doesn't have any liners, and it's not as strong as other Triads. I'm sure that it's still very strong for being a blade this small. I wouldn't want a baton with anything like this anyway. Things would have to be going very wrong before you start using a stick and pounding on your little Wharncliffe blade for survival or anything like that. I'm sure that it is still very strong, but there is a little bit of play in every dimension, and that's not something that we typically see on Triad locks. The handle is Zytel. This is a green option. I believe they have orange and pink in addition to the black, and as previously discussed, there are no liners. Probably still very strong without needing that extra weight from having skeletonized steel liners. The ergonomics are pretty dang good for a knife in this size range. That's a lot of why I'm really passionate about this blade. For a really small knife that I can clip onto my pocket for that EDC utility cutter task, in addition to my large defensive blade like the Cold Steel Voyager, I can have something like this on my person that's my defensive blade and not need to worry about marring its edge or getting out a really large knife in public when I need to do utility cutting, because I have something small like this that's with me all the time, that's light enough to be nothing, and that works for me in a serious cutting task. If I have to do cardboard, if I have to do cordage or zip ties, whatever it is with a lot of torque on the blade, I would like to do it with this in my hand. This little taper at the end works well for me. It allows my pinky to still get a good engaged grip, and with a knife this size, I still am engaging all 4 fingers, and I really like that. They're pretty dang good overall, and that curved design giving up some space on the blade with that choil really builds on that. It's a really good design for a knife this small. Sort of reminiscent of the Silent Soldier folders, which I was just looking at, so I thought I'd bring them up. Very good, actually. Ergonomics. For something this small, I am a big fan. No real gripes there, and it's one of the main draws to this knife, in my opinion. The clip is one position, which I've harped on before, and I'll especially harp on it because that one position is tip down. Now, with a knife this small, and I'm sure you've heard other reviewers say this, it doesn't matter so much about the clip. I specifically clip this outside my pocket because I can. It's a very strong clip and a very light knife. It's not going to go anywhere, and that works for me. But even clipped inside the pocket, it doesn't matter so much because you draw it up out and then it's easy to reposition your hand around it and get a good opening, and now you're in position. As opposed to other knives that are larger, it's more difficult to do that repositioning, and that's why we harp on tip down so much. But with a small knife, it really doesn't matter so much. The presentation is really nice. I do think it's an attractive blade. That's pretty subjective, and some people aren't going to like it. I love it. I think it's very attractive. What with the green and all, you can pick a color that you would like. I'm sure some people will go apeshit over that orange. I like the green. Green's one of my favorite colors. I originally bought this blade because literally days after I made a video harping on companies for only offering one coloration, Cold Steel on Blade HQ released their different colorations for this knife and a couple others, and this was the one that I wanted because it had a pocket clip. Quality. Overall, pretty nice. The edge was fine. The play, that's obnoxious, but the edge and the hardware were good. So quality overall, we'll say just fine. The clip works, the hardware works, lock is fine minus the play. Overall, really good. We have a generous lanyard hole there that you could actually get some cord through if you wanted to put a lanyard on here. I haven't done so far, and I don't need to because it's clipped outside my pocket, but I could see how somebody would want to store that in a pocket unclipped and wanted a lanyard. Anything like that, you actually have a generous provision for that you could use. On to value. For $26, and it's the only small EDC folder you're ever going to need if you're anything like me. That's pretty dang good. This blade has been an integral part of my EDC for a long time. Like I said, it frees me up to carry other knives that I want to EDC, whether it's for defense, reference the Cold Steel Voyager, it was the Espada for quite a while, and then other blades that I feel like EDCing. Say, if I want to EDC my Kershaw Echelon, which is brand new, I haven't even done a first impressions on it, present from my girlfriend for Christmas. yeah, I can EDC this too, and I don't need to worry about it. If it's not working for me, I can take it out of whatever EDC task I'm doing, go back to something old and reliable, and I can do that because this weighs nothing. Like I said, I clip it outside my pocket, no pocket space taken up, and you've got a little badass cutter that cuts really well. That AUS 8 takes a wicked edge if you hone the factory edge, or if after you've damaged it sufficiently, if you reprofile, you can put beautiful edges on the cold steel AUS 8. The retention isn't as good as a really premium steel is going to be, but the sharpening is just that much easier. So it's no problem as far as I'm concerned for steel quality. The value, I think they knocked it out of the park. There are blades this size that you will pay a little bit more for. On to competition, some blades that we've seen and that have been reviewed before this knife, even though this knife really sparked my interest into this really small minimalist EDC folder market. I didn't think I'd be interested in it. I was fine carrying a large defensive blade and then something like a Tenacious for EDC, something in that size range. Now I'm really liking this because I can carry my large folder, my small EDC utility cutter, and then like I said, I can rotate in one more, whether it's a backup tactical folder, defensive folder like my ZTO200, whether it's a show-off knife, a gentleman's knife, like my Lion Steel, anything like that, I can rotate through my EDC without worrying about covering my utility cutter base because I've got it right here. So the Boker Nano, this thing whoops its ass. The Spyderco Chicago, a little bit less so, but this knife still is a very, very strong contender, and I think it dominates it. The K-Bar Mini Dozier, not really a competitor, I would say. I'll put an asterisk next to that one because I had no real problems with that blade, but the ergonomics were just not on par with this little badass here. And so the one blade that I've held that was any real kind of competition is the old Kershaw Scallion. You guys can see there the size comparison. The Kershaw is a significant amount bigger in pocket, but it also offers a bigger blade and some pretty good cutting performance with good ergonomics as a very small knife. A little bit heavier though. Beyond that, I've handled the small Spydercos. The Equilibrium in specific seems to be competing with this knife, and this knife just kicks their asses. It's got a really short cutting edge, and I can handle that because for a small knife that's got good cutting performance, even with bad jimping, you guys can see there, the jimping is too wide a grain, it is not aggressive enough, and it doesn't really lock your hand in at all. It's just a stylization thing. So we can basically say that there is no jimping. But the way the knife is built does allow for a really far forward Filipino grip. You can get your thumb really close to the tip there, and it feels fine, and that allows for some really powerful cutting out of a really small blade. That combined with the very mellow hollow grind, it is just an awesome cutting package for a really small blade that weighs nothing. So there isn't a whole lot of competition as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, after you buy this, if you're anything like me, you won't really need another small EDC utility cutter. So pass or fail, that's a pretty emphatic pass. We'll move on to specs really quick and then I'll ramble around vaguely moving toward an end type thing. Overall length, 5 inches, and it seems smaller than that. Blade length of 2 inches, cutting edge of 1.3 inches. That is a very small cutting edge. Like I said, I'll take it if the ergonomics are good, if the cutting power is there, and they are. Handle length of 3 inches, blade thickness of 0.1 inches, that is narrow and it should be for a blade this small, and weight 1.6 ounces. I'm not typically one to harp on weight. I'm 17, I don't carry a firearm, and so I've got no problem carrying something big and burdensome like a Cold Steel Voyager XL Tonto and another blade. Like I said, that's part of what I love about this blade is it's changed my EDC system. It allows me to integrate more fun stuff like this and not have to worry about, you know, what if the lock loosens up on this? What if I don't like how this is cutting? Do I need to test it before I carry it as part of my EDC? No, I just don't worry about it. I have this. Everything's going to be okay. So it really is a great blade. I'm not sure that this sheet can really express why I'm so happy about this blade. What it really gets down to is with a non-optimal grind, with a one-position clip, with a very small cutting edge, and being a mini version of something which for some reason I've never liked. I've always liked full size or larger. Those knives just seem to fit my hand better. This blade has become one of my favorite EDC cutters, and it's got to be in any list that I make of my favorite knives because it's with me all the time. I'll make videos talking about my EDC system that integrates this after things settle down a little bit here following Christmas, but all you need to know is if you're the kind of person that likes to carry more than one blade, If you want to carry a defensive folder or just another folder for you to review, if you want to carry a fixed blade, or if you're going to be going someplace where you only want to carry one small knife, you need to check out the Cold Steel Mini Tuff Lite. Its ergonomics are very good and its cutting performance is there. It is just a squared away little blade competing in a rank of knives where I didn't think I was going to like anything that was made. So this blade has been great to me so far. I've seen enough people reviewing small knives and being disappointed. Knife Girl Alley just reviewed the Boker Keycom or Subcom, and she didn't like it. I didn't like the Boker Nano, which for some reason people do like. But anyways, if you're in that kind of market for a small folder, you really need to check out this blade. It costs $26. You won't regret it. If you do regret it, I'll buy it from you. I'm not kidding. I'll give it away on my Instagram, something like that. Buy the blade. It's too cool not to have. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more of the same.